I will be presenting my final project for this class for writing 2. I'll go ahead and be presenting on the racism and the death penalty. So for today's agenda, I'll be going over the definition of what racism is in terms of the death penalty and what it is, and I'll also be going over the history and where it started and how it started, and I'll be going over 2 solutions on how we could fix this problem and how we could bring it to light for our society, and finally I will be going over my conclusion. Race and the death penalty has been a controversial topic that has been debated for decades. Race has been an influence when receiving a death sentence and capital punishment due to these following factors. So individuals that have committed a crime against a white individual have been seen through this racial profiling lens. Additionally, judges and juries, racial profiling people of color during a trial, and individuals not having proper representation in court. Oftentimes, people of color are sentenced for committing the same crimes as Caucasian individuals. Due to recent data, it shows that majority of defendants on death row are made up of African Americans. Additionally, more than 75% of death row defendants who have been executed were sentenced to death for killing white victims. And this information and data has been brought to light by the ACLU. This graph on the right-hand side shows the persons for Black/white interracial murders in the U.S. since 1976, and this data is as recent as of 2020. So as we can see in this bar graph, the number of executions of white defendants causing harm on Black victims is a lot lower than Black defendants causing harm on white victims. This data just goes to show that African American defendants are more likely to receive capital punishment compared to a white defendant causing the same crimes. More data shows, as we can see in this graph on the right-hand side, the current populations waiting to be sentenced by race. African Americans are one of the largest groups sitting in death row, and they are the largest minority group. In 82% of studies, race showed to be affluent and increase the likelihood to be charged to capital punishment. So where did this all start? So I'll be going over the history of this problem and where it originated from. So the history where it dates back is the late 1800s. African Americans were sentenced to harsh sentencing for committing crimes that were non-homicidal, such as petty theft, arson, etc. So types of these punishments included lynching, being burned at the stake, and also sometimes being whipped to death. The bases also relied on slave status, and it played a part in capital punishment and not for whites. This also led into the 1950s. During the civil rights movement, people of color were still being lynched for the same crimes being committed as white individuals. These people and minorities were being made a spectacle when receiving these punishments, such as lynchings. So some solutions that can help fix this problem is diversifying the justice system. Having diverse judges, juries, attorneys, and also police officers will help get the proper representation in court and can help individuals plead their case. Another solution to this problem is public awareness. Educating the public is a great start to getting the message across. Peaceful protests and public campaigns have been a great way of spreading a message for decades and has been effective. So why diversify the justice system? By diversifying highly regarded positions in the justice system, it will allow minorities to have the same representation as whites. A journal written by Amy Farrell suggests research on decision-maker diversity and core outcomes have neglected to consider racial group representation among multiple categories of workers involved in shaping outcomes. So they suggest that the workers working during these trials have failed those individuals for not having proper representation and resources for these minorities. Another solution for this problem is public awareness. So public awareness has always been an effective tool to getting a message across. Tools such as peaceful protests and public campaigns have been a very helpful way of spreading a message across. Historically, protesting has allowed individuals to voice their opinion and to raise awareness for what they believe in. Example of this was during the 1950s and 60s, during the civil rights movement. We see people protesting and fighting the fight that has allowed them to get their message across to the government. Decades later, individuals are still fighting the same fight, which is equality. Another way to educate these people is actually getting proper training for police officers. The first people who are encountering these individuals are police officers, so it is very important for them to receive proper training on how to encounter situations and not to automatically racial profile an individual. So just to wrap up my final thoughts and conclude with this statement, racial injustice has been a controversial and complicated topic that has been debated for decades. Capital punishment should be abolished due to a significant number of minorities being wrongfully convicted and put on death row. There are a high number of factors that implies race has been an influence when sentencing a person of color for capital punishment. Examples of these factors for minority include being sentenced to death for committing the same crime as an individual or committing a crime to a white individual, judges selecting an all-white jury panel, and minorities not having the resources or funds to hire representation in trial. Generally, racism can be seen in many stages when convicting a person of color. This includes from conviction to the sentencing. This can result in the misrepresentation of those sentenced to death, highlighting the systematic bias in the criminal justice system. People of color have been receiving this kind of injustice for centuries, and the effects of these microaggressions can be seen to this day. Historically, we have seen a discriminatory pattern of individuals receiving capital punishment based off the color of their skin. With solutions like diversifying the justice system and public awareness of this problem. Thank you for your time and your consideration. This took a lot of time to research and to dive into this topic, and thank you for listening to what I had to say.
We were just lovers, sitting in a car, listening to plot, falling for each other. Picking out skies, feeling super childish, Madonna Glover. It's called for my mother.